we were in a meeting the other day and we were talking through a couple of options that we could help workshop out with a client. And you mentioned the product people spectrum. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that is and how you're thinking we could use it?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because, well, we at Citi recognize that when there are words that you say in our dictionary that mean different things, right? And the classic is roadmap, right? Oh, I need a roadmap. And it's
Yeah.
like when you
Oh,
say
for sure.
roadmap, it means 10 different things, right? And so that's the same with product. It's when people say I want a product person or a product department, there's so many different things to think through. And when I say spectrum, we always think about really people on this product spectrum of on one side of this, you've kind of got this entrepreneurial type person, right? You've got almost a visionary of what you could see what's there. You could see an entrepreneur in residence, another term that we use a lot, that traditionally uses like lean startup techniques, that does rapid, experimentation, does market validation, really is almost very entrepreneurial in their mind. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have this person that's more, um, I would say more organized, detail oriented traditionally, and both sides can be that, but more detail oriented. They organize a backlog. They're concentrating on making sure the team has everything they need to be clear on what's being delivered inside of maybe they're more concentrated on Scrum. Like when you think of Scrum or Agile, they're maybe the more traditional product owner role if you're talking about a development organization. So there's this spectrum because too many people, especially when, I was talking with clients about job descriptions and they're hiring a product person and I can't tell you the number of times they've said we hired the wrong person where they meant to hire on one side of the spectrum, but they got the complete opposite. And so it's that same problem of roadmap where it's like roadmap means so many different things. Well, product in our experience also means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we refer to it as like the product people spectrum of where are you on that spectrum.
And do we use that? How should we use that? Should we think about it as like, what are you as the client looking for? Or is it more of what, as we build the team, what do you need and how can we help you? Or maybe it's a little bit of both.
I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah. I think a lot of projects, especially in their infancy, right? They need that entrepreneur in residence product person. That's like that's almost a
Yeah.
necessity, right? It's like that's like a founder type of person. And then when you start to get to more like at Citi, we've got like the scale, kind of like you're starting to scale and you're starting, 0 to 1, you've maybe hit product market fit. Then you start to
Mhm.
systematize and need more process. So as you're growing, you need to increase the amount of process. So it's almost like usually traditionally we see like at the very beginning, need for an entrepreneur in residence is much, much higher, or it should be, than having someone who's like more regimented because traditionally you're doing a lot more experimentation. You're not having
Oh,
ideally a formalized
yeah.
dev team, and then you start to move into that more formalization of like, hey, we actually have software we're building. So
It's so interesting to think about how the different skill sets that you need available to you, depending on where you're at in your journey of building and developing and scaling and bootstrapping and validating all your ideas in your
it's
product.
key. It really is because I mean, at the beginning, you're going to need a lot more out of the box thinkers, right? You're going to need those people that just, hey, how can we learn the fastest, right? And then, but when you get to the engineering
Yeah.
talent side of the equation, which is later in your journey, it's you're there. There's the thinking of how do I build this in the best way, like architecturally, a lot of times. So it's just a different mindset, and so it's a challenge if you bring those people in too early, they're going to want to over engineer something. So it's a balance of
Yeah.
trying to figure that out.
The the other thing that comes to mind. So how do you actually like product people spectrum? We're using this as like a troubleshooting tool with clients you're thinking to be like, okay, what are you looking for?
Yes.
And then triangulate that with where we think they're at in their journey. So it's like, we hear you looking for these types of
Yes.
skills and jobs to be done on your team. But you've also said that you're here in scale and there's a gap
Yes.
between those two. Is that kind of where
Yes.
you're
Well, and
okay?
the where this kind
I
of
love
came
that.
out of is actually Gordon Food Service. So when I sat down with Bethany, it was probably about 6 months ago now. I sat down with her at coffee and I just got back to GR because I was traveling all over the place, right? And we sat down for
Yeah.
coffee when I was back in town a week. And she's like, yeah, we just hired Josh, we just hired this product person. I'm really struggling with them, like really struggling. And
Mm.
she kept saying things like, he just wants to get organized on Scrum and like really institute a ton of process and procedures. And it's like, what I really need him to do is like talk to customers and figure out what to build and
Yeah.
how to build it and what's important and what's not. And that's when this came up that it was like, well, I think you hired the wrong person. I think you there's, and I talked about the spectrum of like on one side you've got this kind of person that is very make sure the team has what they need, make sure we have a very clear backlog. But on the other end of the spectrum is they're figuring out what we should build. Like there's no backlog. There's like they're creating the backlog. They're
Yeah.
putting the vision together and they have the clay and they're like, well, I think it's kind of like this. What do you
Hmm.
think? And then the other kind of product person's like, well, give me the clay structure. Let me just like fine in the details. So it's
Yeah.
very, very, very different. There's so many like related books to that too of like if you've read
Yeah.
Rocket Fuel talks about this visionary
Oh,
and
should
integrator.
probably get a book.
So it's like and this is like what does a
Oof.
business need? A business needs a visionary and they need an integrator. Like if you look at all the great companies that have been built, Steve Jobs was the visionary and then you've got Woz was the integrator, right? So
Yeah.
you've got all these different, visionary integrators and that's basically what this is. This is like, when you've got a product, it's really like you need the visionary. Who's the vision? And then you need the integrator who keeps things organized. So there's a little bit of need for both.